All right. Well, Mitch, thanks for agreeing to let me record you on the little bit of conversation here that I want to share at the forum meeting here in Lincoln. I've been talking to you for the last, I don't know, year or two about stuff going on in Kearney, and kind of observed some of the ways that you operate and that you work with the churches and some of the pastors there. And I just wanted you to share a little bit about what does it look like in Kearney, your involvement, and what's going on a city level amongst the churches.
Yeah, so man, first of all, just sorry I couldn't be at the forum today. I really wanted to be there, but I'm going to be in DC, and so we're recording this a few days earlier. But let me just share a couple things. First of all, maybe just a little bit of my heart in just who we are as ministers and what we're called to do. I think that sometimes when God puts us into a place of ministry, in a good way, we take ownership, as in this is what God's called me to do. And so we really grab a hold of that thing. Maybe in a negative way, we take ownership in a way that it becomes just about us, and we really shield ourselves out and away from the rest of the body of Christ. And we can also just get into this flawed place where we think that we're the only ones doing anything that matters. and that's just not a good place to be. And so I really love to champion the kingdom things that are happening around us, and really how can the more people that understand this, that can speak life to other leaders, other pastors, other ministers, to help us just realize that, you know what, we're better together. We're all called to be together. We're going to celebrate an eternity together one day, and we're all family. We're all under the same mission, even though we got a little different viewpoint on a few things. But we're trying to head the same way. And so the more that we can be kingdom focused and kingdom oriented is just a beneficial thing. And that takes a little bit of humility to say, hey, I'm willing to go get on your turf, even though I'm maybe not all that comfortable. I'm willing to go to where you're at. I'm willing to go speak to you. I'm willing to go encourage you. And then on the other side, I'm willing to receive from somebody that maybe doesn't speak the same language I do, maybe doesn't look through the same lens I do, but can I receive the good aspects and say, hey, God, here's what I just heard. What out of that did I need to hear? And so, there's a group of us pastors that gather once a month from all kinds of different evangelical viewpoints. And there's times where I'm challenged a little bit by another person's perspective that actually helps me grow. And that's what I mean by we're better together and just being kingdom focused. But so that's just a little bit of my heart. But here in Kearney, there are some just some good things that have been happening that I'm just really excited about, and just to see some unity coming together. We've done some different things together. One thing that happened just a couple weeks ago was the Todd Becker Foundation came to Kearney. Now they're from Kearney. This is their home base, and they go to different schools almost every week. They're somewhere in the nation, somewhere in the Midwest, bringing hope and life to students. It's a very evangelistic organization. People are coming to Christ every week through them. And many of our churches have supported them. But, I was thinking about how it was hard for Jesus to perform miracles in his hometown. And in the same way, they had not been invited back into the schools here in Kearney in 16 years. When the organization first started, they were here, and they had not been back for 16 years, really because they hadn't been let in. And they exclusively go to schools because they want to get on the kids' turf, and they get kids to come in on a Wednesday night at the school where they're able to freely share the truth of the gospel. And so we had one of those events just a few weeks ago, and 15 churches came together to sponsor this. And what was really powerful was there was 120, 130 volunteers that were there to meet with students one-on-one after the service, to do one-on-one discipleship, evangelism, to connect. And it was powerful to see so many different pastors there, people from different churches. It's so encouraging, just as leaders. The 130 leaders there alone, knowing each other, working together for a common goal, it brought unity. It's that thing Jesus prayed for, that we would be unified. It brought a sense of unity because it wasn't about your church or my church. It was about, we want you to know Jesus. And so somewhere between 800 and 1,000 kids were there that night. And when Keith made his just unashamed altar call, where by faith he gets down on his knees with his back to the congregation, and he begins praying and inviting people to come join him and for them to surrender their life to Christ. And they cut kids. Nobody moved for a while, and it was like, oh man, dear God, please somebody get up and move. And then as soon as one did, the floodgates opened up, and about 200 kids were down front on their knees when Keith finally stood up, turned around to see who was even there, after he'd already prayed with them and helped them walk through receiving Christ. And then after that, they funneled them over to us volunteers. We each grabbed one or two, went and had one-on-one conversations, and there were some beautiful conversations. Kids that were, on the edge of probably contemplating suicide. There was kids that were just questioning faith, had not been to church, variety of things, and so great touch points and able to really connect them with individual churches in different places. So that was a really powerful unity thing that happened. There's also a group of guys, of men, who just said, you know what, we want to take responsibility for our city. And so we have a hike bike trail that goes around our town. And they said, hey, let's prayer walk as men. They specifically said, we want to do it this year with men and let men lead the way, where sometimes in our faith, we're not having men lead the way they need to be leading. And so this group of men are gathering, and they're going to spend the day walking around our hike bike trail that circles our town, and calling it the Jericho Walk. So that's happening here. It will have happened by the time you see this video, but really excited about that. Just another point of unity. And, that's really important. It's important because there are things that are happening in our cities that maybe we're unaware of, that the enemy might do or be bringing in. And I shared with Jason a few minutes ago about one thing I found out about from one of the major industrial places in town who was lacking employment. So they hired a company to bring in some employees, and they brought 100, they bust 100 men in from the inner city, and not to try to put a lot of labels on anybody, but it just came carrying some baggage. And so they bust them in. They don't have transportation. They're hanging out in these hotels, and and doing things that your flesh does. There's some drug use and alcohol abuse is taking place there. They're calling up local girls and inviting them out. There's some evil things that are happening, because that's what happens when people don't know Jesus. Evil happens. Part of the world we live in. And, my flesh immediately wants to just go and rail against that. And you don't belong here in this town, which it doesn't. The evil doesn't. And I'm trying to help guys really focus in on what is the piece that we need to go after. We need to stand against the evil, but is there a way we can love these men? And so I'm looking for a way to try to get a few guys together to show up in these parking lots and do a barbecue and invite these guys out and build relationships, because they have nowhere to go. They're working 7 days a week, living in a hotel. That's got to be a miserable place to be. And so really trying to bring a group of people together to do that, trying to find what are the unique things within our city that we can bring churches together to begin to bring life to. How can we take something that looks dead and bring life to it? And so those are a few things that are happening here in Kearney, in central Nebraska. And we're trying to bring some people in from the region as well. And how can we encourage people right here where they're at? So those were a couple things.
Yeah. So where does the unity that you are seeing in Kearney with these churches coming together for the Todd Becker outreach and some of these other things, where does that come from? How did you guys develop that as a culture in Kearney?
Well, I think a couple things have happened. And it even happened before I was a senior pastor here, with some other pastors coming together. And there has to be a willingness to, really meet around the cross, but yet understand where each other are at, and being willing to just have a display of humility in our lives. And somebody in that group has to make a decision to serve and say, hey, I'm here to serve you. How can I help you? And one by one, intentionally having coffee, having lunch, serving, speaking into, and giving and resourcing to other people. When you serve and you give and you pour into it, opens up people's hearts. And so even in the church where we have divided pieces with each other, I have found when one church is willing to serve another one, all of a sudden walls come down and we realize, hey, what's the most important thing going on here? And so over a period of years, that takes some time to see the fruit of serving, the fruit of giving, to where it begins to bear fruit. And so we've borne enough fruit now that people within our community have been willing to come together more so. And it doesn't always have to be led. Some of the senior leadership of churches have helped with that, but it doesn't always have to be led with that. There is a way to build relationships and say, hey, this isn't about inviting you to my church or me going to your church. This is about, what does God want to do in our city, in the kingdom? What can we do together? And so that was part of what happened with the Todd Becker event. All those hundreds of volunteers there that volunteered to go do the training and learn the process. They were willing to come together under the name of Jesus. And somebody has to always be reminding us of that. I mean, I got to be reminded of the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Yeah. There's especially with churches, and there can just be a machine that just happens because, you know what, every Sunday's coming, and it can become about Sunday. And Sunday is not what it's about. It's about encountering the Lord. That happens on Sundays, but it happens other times too. And I have to remind myself of, what is the purpose of what I'm doing? Is it about me, or is it in my own pride and my ego and numbers and me being right? Or is it about serving the Lordship of Jesus Christ? And when people begin to shift their attention and they see somebody model that, and a lot of times in the city, somebody's got to be the tip of the spear. Somebody's got to be the one out there saying, hey, I'm pushing the boundary. Let me model this and let me bring us together. And when that happens, there can begin to develop momentum. And we've seen some good momentum here in Kearney in a variety of ways that ebbs and flows. But I'm looking forward to the back half of this year with some more momentum.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all of that, and I've really been encouraged over the last few years just watching the work that you've been doing. You know, I know during COVID, you and some of the senior pastors posted "We Are Kearney" videos.
Oh, yes,
kind of encouraging people.
You know, one thing the Lord just was talking to me about was like, how can we encourage the people of our city, especially when there's starting to be a lot of criticizing and complaining when certain restaurants were shut down because they didn't have enough work, didn't have enough helpers, and all those kind of things. And I just heard so much complaining that people couldn't get their way, and the things that they needed weren't happening. And so the Lord just said, well, why don't you put some videos together and speak about the fruit of the Spirit? And like, as believers, why don't you put some videos together for the church, for the believers of the town? And I sat down to write the first one down, that I was going to do. And I got done writing out my script for what I was going to do. And the Lord said, I was getting ready to start the second one. He said, why are you doing this all yourself? He said, why don't you let somebody else help you with this? And he dropped some pastors' names in my heart. And so I got a hold of them. And so 4 of us did 4 different fruits of the Spirit. We did one each week leading up to Christmas. And just kind of on location in different parts of town, really directed towards the body of Christ and just who we are and we call it We Are Kearney. Like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we want to represent. And you know what? Sometimes I just need somebody to remind me who I'm supposed to be. I didn't know what the Word does. The Word reminds us. It says it's a mirror that's supposed to reflect who we are. The Word reminds us who we're supposed to be. And so, in my flesh, some of that was like, well, God, you gave me this idea. Let me just make all 4 of these videos. And that's that selfish pride thing. And God said, no, why don't you invite some other men in? And so we did. And I'll tell you what, that gave us a lot of momentum for every week for me, because I showed them on Sunday mornings. I showed them there as well, and then encouraged my congregation to watch them, like them, share them, all that kind of stuff. But like, I wasn't afraid of let these other guys speak into the body. And that, I think that went a long ways, and it speaks a lot. I reference this a lot with our congregation. Like, listen, it's not about us. We're a building with a door over the name of it, but it's about Jesus.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Well, I appreciate that. And I on the agenda today is to continue our conversation about discipleship. And one of the things that I'm hoping we'll get to in our conversation is what it looks like to disciple a city. And I just want to say thank you. I've really looked to you as a good example in our state of somebody who really is walking out, I think, what it means to engage their city and be an example of how to meet the people, but also to disciple and share the love of the Lord with their city. So
Hey, I appreciate that, Jason. And hey, all of you at the forum there, hey, I'm looking forward to meeting with you the next time. The next time I'm going to do everything I can to be there. So have an amazing day.
Thanks, Mitch. We'll be missing you today. So.